Welcome to the Internet History Podcast. I'm your host, Brian McCullough. Brad Silverberg is someone that I've wanted to interview since the very first day that we started this project. In the early 1990s, Brad was one of the key champions of the Internet within Microsoft. As the first ever senior vice president of the Internet Platform and Tools Group, he essentially led Microsoft's earliest efforts to embrace the Internet and the web, beginning in late 1995, early 1996. As the senior vice president for the Personal Systems Division, Brad actually also led the development of Windows, from the launch of Windows 3.0 through Windows 95, which he helped establish as Microsoft's greatest ever product. And today he's a venture capitalist with both Fuel Capital and Ignition Partners. Due to time constraints, in this episode we don't go into the Windows story until right at the end, but since we're here for Internet history anyway, I'm sure you're going to be as fascinated as I was to hear Brad Silverberg describe how Microsoft embraced the Internet and the web. Brad Silverberg, thanks for coming on the Internet History Podcast.
Hey, it's my pleasure, Brian.
So I believe that early on in your career, you worked both at the Stanford Research Institute, which was one of ARPANET's original nodes, and you also did networking work at Apple. So early on, is it fair to say that you came to be a believer in the system of the web and the net and the open protocols of the Internet especially?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I was at SRI, my first job out of grad school in the late 70s. And SRI was, I think, the first node on the Internet. Back then it was called the ARPANET and the MILNET. And so early on in my career, I was very connected. We did a lot of email and took full advantage of connectivity with our colleagues around the world that we collaborated with. Then, after I left SRI, I went to work for Apple. I worked on Lisa as a software developer, and one of the projects I worked on towards the end of my time there was on networking. And Apple was developing its own protocols called AppleNet, and it puzzled me, like, why are we inventing our own protocols which are similar but different and incompatible with what was emerging as the standard at that point, which were Xerox's XNS protocols. So I was always in favor of, if you're going to do networking, the whole point is to connect people together, and that meant open protocols.
Eventually, obviously, you go to Microsoft. I'm curious, in the early 90s, prior to 94, prior to the web taking off, was there any sort of Internet culture at Microsoft? And I'm talking about specifically, like, among the engineers and the programmers and the like.
No, I wouldn't say there was an Internet culture. I think there were individuals who had been exposed to the Internet that were excited by it. Myself, Sanofsky, Jay Allard, Henry Sanders, a bunch of us had been exposed to it. At the same time, Microsoft had its own networking protocols, and Novell had its own networking protocols. And when I was running the Windows group, I became a big proponent of adopting TCP/IP for Windows. And so while we did have a Microsoft NetBEUI stack, we had compatibility with Novell. I also had a project to build TCP/IP. So I felt TCP/IP was going to be the long-term winner in the networking protocol arena, and I wanted Microsoft to have built-in support, high-performance built-in support to connect to TCP/IP. So we did. We built that actually into Windows for Workgroups, which was an ideal platform for that. Prior to that, it was very difficult, especially on Windows 3X, to have a high-performance TCP/IP stack because of the memory requirements. But with Windows for Workgroups, we had a virtual device driver model called VXDs, which allowed the device driver to run up in protect mode and not take part of that 640K space that was so limiting. And as a result, we could get a very high-performance TCP/IP stack built into Windows for Workgroups, and that's formed the basis of what we put into Windows 95. We also wanted to make it much easier to use. If you remember back then, TCP/IP was notoriously difficult to use and configure as an end user. It had static IP addresses, and you had to set the subnet mask. And so for any individual user who wanted to connect their workstation to use TCP/IP, it was a real pain in the neck and was expensive, and support desks hated it. So we wanted to innovate and make it fully plug and play. Our philosophy with Windows 95 was to make everything plug and play, and so we innovated with DHCP, and we did a bunch of things to allow it to work in a dial-up environment and make TCP/IP the preferred networking protocol.
Well, let's talk some about the chronology of that, because in the early '90s to into the mid '90s, you're working on the Chicago project, which would become Windows 95. Do you remember when the ideas were first being raised to integrate internet features into Windows 95?
Well, it was kind of a continuum. I was working on a bunch of different things all together. I was working on Windows 3X. I was working on Windows for Workgroups, and then Windows 95. I had MS-DOS. I had a bunch of different projects that worked for me, and there was an overlap between Windows for Workgroups and Windows 95. And so I did view it as a continuum. The first step really was to the TCP/IP stuff that I mentioned, to get that into Windows for Workgroups.
Right.
And the underlying kernel for Windows for Workgroups 3.1.1 was the kernel that we were going to use for Chicago. It had the VXD driver model. It had fully protect mode, 32-bit underlying operation. It had a new protect mode, high-performance 32-bit file system. So that was kind of laying the basis for what became Chicago and Windows 95. And that was in probably 92. I think Windows for Workgroups 3.1.1 shipped in 1992, maybe 1993. So we were thinking about internetworking and TCP/IP as your local networking protocol at that point. And then somewhere in around 92, 93, I started thinking, higher levels in the stack, and became aware of the web and the HTML and the browser, and saw that really, I got really excited about that. I saw that it was going to provide, I viewed it this was going to be the next generation computing. We were in the GUI generation now. We were still PC/GUI generation. We were still in the process of making that a big standard. But then you have to look out what comes after that. And I was particularly excited about the potential of the web. And so sometime in into 93, maybe early 94, I had a project going on internally to build a web browser. At that point, it wasn't obvious. There was all different types of internet protocols. There was to do all kinds of different things.
Right.
And really, the web consolidated all that. There was Archie and Gopher and all kinds of stuff that
I have a question about that. So was there a sense at the time, not only at Microsoft but others in the industry, that the internet was kind of simply too wild and woolly to ever go mainstream, and like maybe everyone expected network computing to take off and go mainstream, but the fact that it was the web that caused it to take off maybe caught some people by surprise?
You had to have the underlying capability first. Having TCP/IP built into the operating system in a high-performance way was a necessary enabling factor to allow the web to take off. And there was a lot of experimentation. It wasn't clear in 92, 93 what the killer application for the internet would be. So I think it did take some people by surprise, but to me, it was the manifestation of the full potential of the personal computer. To me, the web was more than just internetworking. It was more than just connecting computers together and extracting information from them. It was delivering a level of ease of use to the personal computer, to me, that I felt was kind of the destiny of personal computing, the thing that was the next step beyond graphical user interfaces. So there were a lot of skeptics, certainly in Microsoft or around the world, about what was going to be the next thing after graphical user interfaces on PCs. And I think in 1995, 96, 97, it became clear that the web was going to be it.
This is also, though, the era of online services, proprietary online services, and Microsoft is developing one of their own.
CompuServe and AOL.
Right, and so you guys are developing the MSN network, which is supposed to be a part of that. So even though you're saying you're a believer in that the internet and the web is the way to go and is what's going to win, did you have to fight? Was there a... Okay.
Have you read the book, Breaking Windows?
Yes, I have. So okay. I'm curious, strategically...
Yeah. So when you say you guys is a big phrase that at Microsoft, there were a lot of different... Microsoft is well known for having many different groups who have their own opinion of how the world may evolve. And there was certainly the MSN group, which was modeled on the AOL CompuServe. They believed in, quote, the information superhighway and not necessarily the internet. In fact, the first version of MSN that shipped with Windows 95 was X25 based. And my team thought that was just idiotic, and to be honest, to be blunt. And so we developed our own connector for MSN called O'Hare. That was a TCP/IP connector to allow MSN to use TCP/IP instead of the X25 network, which the MSN team was developing. There's no doubt that there was a very vigorous debate inside Microsoft about the internet/information superhighway, online services, where the internet is it an opportunity, is it a threat, and all that stuff. And there's no doubt that there was a very vigorous debate between the Windows group, or my group, and I was probably the leading proponent of the internet inside Microsoft at that time, and the MSN team. We didn't see the world the same way. And how it would evolve. And in fact, Bill's book, The Road Ahead, which was published in 1995, I think October 1995, didn't even really mention the internet. It talked all about the information superhighway and not about the internet. Now, it became clear in 96 that was an incomplete view, and a second edition was rushed out pretty quickly to incorporate the internet. But the primary view of Microsoft, the company, in 1995 was mixed about the internet or online services or Windows, and there were internal debates and battles and arguments and factions that took a number of years to get resolved.
I'm curious about that internally, because again, especially, the end of '94, all of '95, this is the biggest project that Microsoft has ever had, getting Windows 95 out the door. And, there's these famous series of memos that are credited with starting to alert Microsoft internally to the strategic implications of the web and things like that. What was it like on the ground as you're focusing on getting Windows 95 out the door, but then it's almost like the landscape is changing at the exact same time? Like, how difficult was that to turn that ship around, and what did that feel like to have that change happening at that time?
Well, like I said, I had multiple projects going on simultaneously. So while I was developing Windows 95, I also had internet projects that were in full swing underway. I had an early project to build an internet browser client that didn't go so well. I was unhappy with the progress, and this was in early 94, mid-94. I was unhappy with the progress, so I changed the leadership of that group, and then I became much happier with the progress. We were making good progress. We were actually looking to buy the BookLink browser to accelerate our efforts, and we were negotiating with BookLink. We had a lot of internal resistance to buying the BookLink browser.
Resistance because people wanted to do it internally? Didn't know why you should buy something?
No, they wanted MSN. MSN.
Okay.
It was the MSN group that fought us really hard. They said, no, we're the ones who should own it. And we don't really believe in the internet. And it became very painful to move that forward. They managed to convince Bill, slow down the entire process of who would have the responsibility for negotiating the final deal with BookLink to buy it. Meanwhile, AOL bought it out from under us, and they paid $25 million, and they bought the BookLink. So we went back to the drawing board.
Was that eye-opening for?
I think that was in the '94.
Yeah, but was that eye-opening for people at
Microsoft?
I mean, go ahead.
Well, again, you say people at Microsoft. I can't speak for the people at Microsoft.
Okay, did that bring people over to your point of view?
For the MSN group, they thought it was victory. And for my group, I thought it frustrated the heck out of me.
Sure.
Because I'm trying to ship Windows 95 as quickly as I can, but I also see this internet thing starting to gather momentum, and I wanted Microsoft to take a leadership position on the internet. I saw the internet as really the next platform, next platform transition in computing. And I wanted Microsoft to get out in front of it and take a leadership position and do something really cool and innovate. And having the BookLink, getting caught up in a lot of internal politics and not being able to move quickly ahead was really frustrating.
You guys,
and so we ended up.
You guys end up with Spyglass.
Buying,
but I was curious.
So we ended up buying Spyglass.
Before Spyglass, though, what about Netscape? Like, wouldn't that be a consideration to purchase them or to license from them at that point?
We had some conversations with Netscape, and they wanted onerous terms. They wanted like a royalty on Windows or something. Like, Microsoft doesn't pay royalties. Like, we're not paying a royalty. It's, we'll just purchase Spyglass. I mean, it's all based on the same code anyway.
Right, the original Mosaic code.
The NCSA code, Mosaic code. So we ended up, we did have some conversations with Netscape, and then those got all mixed up too, because my group was having some conversations. I had conversations with Jim Clark, but then some of the MSN guys, they also got involved. Another guy, whose name I won't mention, he got put in charge of negotiating with Netscape and made a bunch of really stupid statements that didn't reflect my group, my internet group's viewpoint or even really spoke for Microsoft, but were rather sensational, chest-thumping things that became part of the antitrust trial. Well, very embarrassing. Just stupid stuff that was said that really hurt the company, and didn't end with just some guy walking out trying to be a big shot, and it really came back to hurt because it especially didn't even reflect my group, which had at that point had the internet responsibility. So we bought Spyglass not thinking that we were going to build anything long term on it. We needed to get something into market quickly as a placeholder until we could get our own internally developed product that we out there. So we shipped IE1 based on Spyglass. We shipped IE2 based on Spyglass. But at the same time, we had our own internal effort that was a complete rethinking of the browser architecture that resulted in IE3 that changed the rules of the game.
Right.
And it was an unbelievably great product. It was the best. Our goal was to be the best browser from an end-user standpoint, to be the best browser from a standard standpoint, and the best browser from a platform or developer standpoint. And we decided it was a very risky approach to re-architect the browser as a series of components that could be then integrated into other applications. I mean, our view was the internet should be part of everything. It shouldn't be just something walled off into a separate application called a browser. My view and our view of my team was the internet should be part of it. It's just part of every application. And so we wanted people to be able to write their own applications that used the internet, took full advantage of the internet. So we re-architected the browser to be a series of components. And one application of those components would be our browser, the IE3. Another application was we struck a deal with AOL to build their internet browser. Apparently the BookLink project internally to AOL failed and they needed a browser. They were in negotiations with Netscape too, and in fact it made sense for them, from all intents and purposes, to really do a deal with Netscape because, you know, Microsoft was competing with AOL, with MSN, and some people from Kleiner Perkins, who were the investors in Netscape, were also on the board of AOL. So the deal was all set up really for Netscape and AOL to work together. But the problem was the Netscape client was just a bunch of spaghetti code, and you needed to have source access and Netscape's cooperation to be able to build another client out of it. And Netscape was, at the time, extraordinarily arrogant and treated AOL like crap, to be honest. AOL came to Netscape and asked for, hey, we need your support, we need your help, you know, we need to make these changes, here are some of our requirements. And Netscape basically told them to take a hike. And I heard this directly from Steve Case. He said, you know, Netscape told us you'll get what we give you if we ever decide to give it to you when we want to give it to you. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
So I signed my head internet guy, Ben Slipka. I said, you know what? Your job is to embrace AOL with love. And whatever they want, that's what they get. If they say jump, you say how high. And if we win the AOL deal, you know, we felt that was pretty critical to our getting to critical mass with our browser.
And despite the fact
at that point, we were
despite the fact that MSN is competing with AOL, that it was more important to do the AOL deal.
Despite the fact that Steve Case and Bill Gates could barely sit in the same room together, they despised each other so much. I was able to negotiate a deal in the face of incredible distrust between Microsoft and AOL that got Bill's approval and got Steve Case's approval because we gave them whatever they wanted. We gave them a next-generation browser that allowed them to do whatever they wanted, building on our components, and whatever features or support that they wanted, they got from us. and Netscape, did everything they could to kill the deal. To kill the deal that was theirs to lose, and they lost it. And it was a good sign. It was a good example to me, of how Microsoft can be both a competitor and a partner to companies. That when you in a platform business, you do your best to support your developers, even if they compete with another part of your business. And I went overboard to be a good partner to AOL. And I think if you talk to the folks at AOL who we worked with then, a lot of them will still say, we hated Microsoft, but you know what? We loved working with Brad's group. They treated us fairly. They gave us everything we wanted. And they were, they were a good partner. And so that feels good when your biggest competitor, mm-hmm. at a company standpoint, says, hey, we treated them fairly. And IE3 was a groundbreaking product. It changed the rules of the game. And it formed the basis for what we did with IE4, with the HTML and the domain object model and XML, and really turned the browser into a first-class platform.
Can I ask you about the IE team? Because we've had Ben Slivka on, Chris Wilson, Hadi Partovi, and I've heard you say on another podcast that the IE team was one of the best teams you've ever worked with. Was super focused, required little managerial direction, that they all knew what to do. It was almost Zen-like. Can you talk about the IE team a little bit?
Unbelievable. My two favorite teams in my entire career were the Windows 95 team and the IE3 team. Now, you earlier said something about Windows 95 being the biggest project at Microsoft. Actually, the team itself was quite small. The Windows 95 team was under 400 people. The success of Windows 95 might have been one of the biggest Microsoft ever produced, but the team itself was, for building an operating system, was actually tiny. Now, the IE3 team was about 65 people. That's it. 65 people who are all true believers in the Internet, the power of the browser and the Internet to transform people's lives, the positive role that Microsoft could play in helping shape next generation computing. We believed in a way of changing the culture of Microsoft to engage in the broader world in a constructive way and behave in a way which we felt was an example for the company. And I think the AOL relationship is a good example. We signed a deal with Sun. We built a great relationship with Apple. We were on the board of the W3C. Thomas Reardon was a very active and constructive member of the W3C, pushing forward new Internet standards at a time when Netscape was actually acting in a very proprietary, unilateral way, thinking that they could dictate new Internet standards, and they were pulling away from constructive engagement with the community, while Microsoft was embracing it. And in fact, I recall Steve Jobs at our March 1996 PDC, where we introduced IE3. We had Steve Case announcing an AOL deal. We announced a licensing deal with Sun for Java. And we also had Steve Jobs on stage at the IE3 PDC saying how blown away he was about working with Microsoft, how much he enjoyed it, how the Mac IE client was incredible. And he said, what really surprised him was working with Microsoft was what he had expected working with Netscape to be like, and working with Netscape was what he had expected working with Microsoft to be like. He said, I just love working with you guys, and I hope to have a long relationship with you. And that felt great.
Yeah.
We were pushing the state of the art forward. We were innovating with the Internet. We were engaging with the broader community. We were changing the culture of the company. It was a brilliant team with Hadi and Thomas Reardon and Beth Slivka and Chris Jones and John Cordell, and it's only 65 people, but we felt we had the mission of our lives with stakes that high, and we took huge risks architecturally. It wasn't clear that the IE3 architecture actually could be built in a performant way, in a robust way, and but we felt we had to change the rules of the game. We had to, but it came from our view that the internet really needed to be part of everything. Why should the internet be locked up into a browser frame? Every application should be able to do HTTP, HTML, use whatever parts of the stack that it wanted to build those capabilities into its own application.
A couple more questions. You were around the time of early '96. You're named the first, senior vice president of Microsoft's Internet Platform and Tools Group. So you're given the charge of leading all of these initiatives. What were your marching orders, and what was it that you wanted to achieve? What direction did you want to go in?
That's a good question, and it relates a little bit to the earlier conversation. I was really eager to ship Windows 95 so that I could turn 100% of my attention to the internet, because I had both projects going on internally. There were a number of internal other advocates for the internet, like Jay Allard, who wrote a influential memo, Steve Sinofsky, who was Bill's technical assistant, and wrote an influential memo based on his experiences when he went back to Cornell, which was his alma mater.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And talking about, hey, this internet thing is real, and we need to embrace it. So I was super excited to ship Windows 95 and then be able to focus full-time on the internet stuff. And viewing the internet as the next generation platform. So it wasn't so much, and this, you asked about like Bill's tidal wave memo, which came out in December. Mm-hmm. I think it was December of 95. To those of us on the IE team and many of those who were, drinking the internet Kool-Aid for a couple of years, it kind of felt like, it's great that Bill is now finally lending support to the internet, but at the same time, it felt like he was the last executive in the company to come around. So it was nice because now it kind of eliminated a lot of the internal resistance we had, at least for a period of time, to the internet, and to have Bill's support.
Why do you think he was the last? Why do you think he was the last to come around?
Well, there were a lot of conflicting positions inside the company that he had to reconcile: the MSN team, the Windows team, the internet stuff. Trying to, if you're Microsoft in the middle of 1995, the world is pretty good. You're top of you're king of the hill. You own Windows right after Windows 95 ships. You the whole technology world revolves around you. Like life is really, really good. Why would you ever want the world to change? Understandably, you don't. Mm-hmm, you don't want the world to change. And you have to ascertain, are there forces external to Microsoft that are even stronger than the strongest company in the world in the technology business? And there were a lot of people who argued, hey, we can, and that was reflected in, Bill's first book. It didn't really talk about the internet. It talked about the information superhighway that Microsoft could be the owner of. And so it took a while for Bill to really get to that position. And I was grateful that he was. It cleared a lot of interference to allow us to go faster, not have to spend as much time in internal debates about things we wanted to do to support the internet. But the debates continued. The Windows group viewed the internet more as a threat than an opportunity. and we viewed it as more of an opportunity, as well as a threat, certainly, but a threat that presented an opportunity for us to take a leadership position and help shape the next generation. And so that's with that belief in mind of being able to shape that next generation platform of what we formed the Internet Platform and Tools Division for. It's hard to say what the charter was because I basically, took the initiative to build it, and with the philosophy of better to ask for forgiveness than to ask for permission sometimes. And kind of charged ahead, even though the charter wasn't completely agreed upon or clear or 100% supported by people throughout the organization. And I figured, well, I'd rather just get out in front as fast as I could and help shape things and, deal with whatever fallout might come. But as it turned out, the debates continued internally, and the Windows team ultimately got the momentum and got the upper hand and had the Internet Platform Tools Division killed. And Microsoft then basically went into hibernation as far as the Internet was concerned for a number of years, and paid the price. They were the Windows first company, not the Internet first company. My view was that you could do both. You could be Internet first and Windows first. And ultimately, that's not what how the company viewed it, and disbanded the IPTD. And as a result, many of us who were working on the Internet in those years ended up leaving the company.
Mm-hmm. Out of frustration that the direction that you thought was right was not the direction they wanted to go in.
Yeah, ultimately that's the case. Yeah. We believed that the Internet was the future, and we wanted to orient the company around building the next Internet platform, including Windows. But ultimately, that was not the direction the company wanted to choose. It chose an Windows first direction, disbanded IPTD, took the Internet Explorer from my group and incorporated it into the Windows group. And that's basically when IE died.
Right. That's Ben Slivka spoke at length about that. Is that just a classic sort of almost cliche Clayton Christensen thing of them wanting to protect this platform that had won so completely?
Absolutely, yeah. They wanted to protect the Windows franchise. I mean, it's all understandable. Like I said, if you're Microsoft, why do you really want the world to change? Hey, life is good. Stock's at an all-time high and going up and up and up. Well, life is good. So it was understandable, but Ben and I and John Ludwig and a bunch of us disagreed pretty strongly and tried for a couple of years to convince Bill and otherwise. But in the end, it was Bill's decision. And Bill was chairman, CEO. He gets to make those calls. It's his job as the CEO to make the hard calls. He made those calls, and after a while, I guess we all felt pretty defeated that our view of Microsoft, as expressed through products like IE3 and IE4, was not going to be the future of the company, and so we went and did other things.
Final question. I want to end on a slightly lighter note, in the sense that this year is. Hey,
it's all good. Life goes on. Life goes on.
Well, let's end with this in the sense.
We all have.
Go ahead.
Microsoft, they make their choices. Bill gets to, they get to make their choices, and outcomes, the consequences.
No, I appreciate your insights.
It was a huge mistake for the company. It lost. It went from the leading technology company to one which is now, struggling to regain relevance. Mm-hmm. I think they're doing an amazing job right now. Satya's doing fantastic, reinventing the company regaining relevance in a mobile cloud-first world. But I think the roots of that go back to Microsoft turning its back on the broader changes that were happening in the world, and deciding it wanted to turn inward rather than continuing its outward-facing approach.
Well, so let me end with this, though, because it is this year is the 20th anniversary recently of Windows 95 launching, and you played such a key role in that. And if you look at just the numbers in terms of penetrations of PCs into homes, and the PC truly going mainstream for everybody, Windows 95 is so key on that. So just on a personal level, when you look back 20 years on that project and that achievement, how do you feel about that?
Incredibly gratified. We had a 20th anniversary party a month ago to celebrate Windows 95, and it was maybe the best party I've ever had in my life. It was so great to get all old friends together back to celebrate what we accomplished in Windows 95, the impact it changed the world. I mean, people talk about, we want to change the world, and, my photo application is going to change the world or something, Windows 95, it changed the world. Our goal, our vision, was very similar to our internet vision, which was we wanted to democratize computing. We were so in love with the joy of personal computing and so intoxicated by the vision of personal computing that we wanted to make it available to everybody around the world, of all shapes, colors, sizes, incomes, educational backgrounds. We wanted to democratize computing, open it up to grandmas, to poor kids in India and China, to allow everybody to connect, communicate, create, be more productive. And with that vision of personal computing and computing for everybody around the world and how that changed our lives, that's what drove us with Windows 95. And Windows 95 was a catalyst. It was the right product at the right time in history, with the right hardware that was becoming available and the right popular awareness and interest. Our view was we wanted to, make a dent in the universe, and to look back and see the role that we had, the team had, it was a small team, to see personal computers, the role that they play in society, to see, like I said, little kids in India or kids in China or kids in Africa have a chance in a globalized society, get a level of education that they wouldn't have, to have global marketplaces for shopping, for communications and Skype, or all these ways that the world is a friendlier, smaller place that levels the playing field, that gives a kid who lives somewhere in the middle of nowhere in China or India or Bangladesh access to an education that he never would have had before possible. Very humbling thing. It's to feel that we had a big part of that is something that we'll be proud of for the rest of our lives and tell our grandkids about, and know that the internet vision we had was really just a continuation, an extension of that vision.
Well, Brad Silverberg, thank you for coming on the podcast and remembering both of those stories, not only the Windows 95 story, but bringing Microsoft online. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
If this is the first time you're listening to this podcast, please subscribe to us on your podcast app of choice. There's plenty more great internet history where that came from. And if you're a longtime listener, then you know what to do to help us out. Rate and review us on iTunes. Because iTunes gives credit to reviews and ratings, and the more great reviews we get, the more people will discover us. As always, there's more info on our website, www.internethistorypodcast.com. The show's Twitter handle is @NetHistoryPod, And my personal Twitter is @BrianMCC. Thanks for listening.